Alright. Hello again, adventures, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number, I think it's 253 now. So, today, I have been working my way through the new player's handbook and drinking orange juice. And I have come to a discovery that I'm not particularly fond of. I made mention in my other Viva video where I was talking about my first impressions of D&D 5.5 and how I'm not really sold on it. It feels like a simplification of 5e, which was already pretty simple. And they made a bunch of decisions that take away choice from the player that didn't make a ton of sense to me. Things like the Paladin Smite thing. I understand that Paladin Smite in and of itself is really, really powerful. So finding a way to nerf that, I can understand why that may be a thing. Paladins will still get taken to the ground by just about any full caster, but compared to other martial classes, they outshine them in a lot of different ways. And if you actually look at the kind of genesis of the Paladin, they were never really designed to be these super powered holy warriors. They were defenders. That's where the paladin auras came from and all those other things like that. And I could totally see them leaning very, very heavily into the more defensive aspects of the paladin, but they didn't. They went and they nerfed Paladin Smite, which again, I'm fine with that. But then they made it force you to use extra points of your action economy to use it. And I've said this many, many times before. In D&D 5th edition, the biggest thing that will decide which side of combat has the advantage is the action economy. Whichever side can do more things on their turn always has the advantage. Doesn't matter what those things are. They could just be a bunch of attacks that do 1d6 plus 2 damage. If another side gets more attacks than yours does, even if they're weak, they have the advantage. So nerfing something by limiting it to once per turn, that works perfectly fine. As soon as you start going, oh, and we're going to force you to pay additional actions to do it, that massively changes everything. And I don't understand why, because Paladin Smite was not that powerful. It was powerful, don't get me wrong. It was not game breaking, and there were other ways to do it. And that brings me to the Warlock. Because the changes they made to the Warlock are really not that massive a difference. They've basically switched when you get your Pact Boon versus when you get when you choose your Pact. Used to be you chose your Pact at first level. You got your Pact Boon at third level, and now they've changed it to where your Pact Boon is something that you can get at first level, or you can just not get a Pact Boon, because it's now an Eldritch Invocation. And there's nothing in the game that forces you to take a Pact Boon. Now, there are a lot of other invocations that require one of those. So I haven't actually done the math to see if it's possible to build a Warlock from 1 to 20 without ever taking a Pact Boon. But it's no longer a required thing, which again would sound like, well, then they're increasing player choice, and it's not really that, because, while again, they're not quote unquote forcing you to take a pact boon now, what they are doing is something that you already got before, Eldritch Invocations. You now have to waste one of those as your pact boon. So it's not that they're giving you more choice. They are taking away something, going, well, if you want it, you can sacrifice something else to get it. And that's really the biggest change that they made to the Warlock. Like, the Warlock did not change drastically between 5 and 5.5. From a mechanic standpoint, from a lore standpoint, they have massively changed Warlocks. And I think, this is just my theory, I think the purpose behind the change is to make Warlocks victims. And to explain what I mean by that, when Warlocks were first introduced, first things first, Warlocks first appeared as bad guys long before they could be chosen as a character class. And the reason behind that was the mere idea of a Warlock was, instead of taking the time to learn how magic works and putting in the work and effort to become a wizard, or just having a natural gift and learning how to use your natural gift as a sorcerer, Warlocks cheated. Effectively, they went, well, I don't want to have to work at this. I just want the payoff at the end. And so they would make a deal that generally, again, especially early Warlocks, the deal was never a good one. Early Warlocks were almost exclusively Fiend Pact, or Archfey Pact came a little later. And the Archfey are not good beings. They are these Eladrin that became so powerful and so long-lived that they just lost any connection with the mortal races. And they became basically elemental forces that really could care less about what happens to the mortals. They really just care about themselves and their own power, which is very similar to the demons and devils that you would make pacts with using the Pact of the Fiend. So Warlocks, from its creation, was basically these people that went, well, there was nothing stopping them from becoming wizards. Becoming a wizard is literally just going to school. Sorcerers is something you have to be born with. Wizards, you just have to learn. So there was nothing stopping them from becoming wizards, but they didn't want to put in the work and the effort, and so they cheated. Now, for anyone that's going, well, my Warlock's not like that. We're talking about their initial idea. So, and again, early Warlocks, when they were bad guys, they were making deals with evil beings. So they were always bad guys. Around 3 or 3.5, I can't remember which one of those is when they actually became a player character choice. They were still viewed as evil-aligned characters. Like, they weren't goody two-shoes or anything like that, and it was still viewed as kind of a lesser way to get access to magic. You didn't want to put in the work to get it, so you just paid someone, effectively, to give you it. You know, Warlocks were effectively the Nepo babies of magic. And that's what they've always been. Even going into 5th edition, your first 3 packs that came as part of the original Player's Handbook were Fiend Pact, Fey Pact, which again, as much as people have tried to kind of flavor the Fey Pact of, no, you're making a pact with a Fey creature. No. Archfey are not good creatures. They're not. They're like this shy off of evil. If they cared about the world, they would probably be evil. They're so detached from all of existence because of their power and their age that they just don't care about anything. But these are not good characters. And then the great old one, Cthulhu. Like, those are your three packs. Warlocks were always meant to be people that made a negative decision and then had to try and figure out how to live their life after that. That's always what they've intended to be until now. And the reason I say that is because you don't pick your pact until 3rd level. I think what they're trying to do is basically make it look like warlocks are tricked into their pact. Which, again, is not a new idea. If I remember correctly, one of the Second Sundering books actually focused on, I want to say it was a Hexblade, who was effectively kind of tricked into their pact. They didn't realize what they were doing. They just kind of signed away because they were in a bad spot, which is perfectly fine. But that wasn't the majority of warlocks. Most warlocks knew what they were doing. And now it's physically impossible for a warlock to understand what it is they're doing at levels 1 and 2 because they don't know who their pact master is. And there are a lot more pact masters that are a little bit more benevolent now than have ever existed before. And if you look into techniques that like cults and abusers use to kind of trap victims, generally what happens is they find a way to develop a hold over someone through something rather innocuous. You know, oh, here, I'll go ahead and get dinner for you today. And then as things keep going, you know what, I've paid for your dinner for like a month now, and you can't even do this tiny thing for me? Like, what's going on here? Or you know what, I can see that, you know, you're in a rough spot. I'll take care of your rent this month. And then a few months down the line, you know, it would really suck if I wasn't able to pay your rent anymore. But, you know, this thing is such a big deal in my life. If someone were to help me out by doing this thing for me, I'd probably be able to focus more on my job, which would help me earn enough money to keep paying your rent. This is a really, really common abuse tactic. You create a dependent, or the abuser creates a dependence from their victim on the abuser, and then they will leverage that dependence. And it generally starts off relatively small. Hey, you know what? My, you know, toilet got backed up, and my, you know, bathroom's a mess. I wish I had the time or the money to hire someone out to bring it in, but I can't. You know what? You're not working today. Would you mind just cleaning that up for me? Oh, yes, of course I would. It's a horrible, degrading job, but, you know, I'm literally cleaning up your excrement, but, you know, you've done so much for me, that's the very least I could do. And then it becomes more and more predatory. And that kind of feels like what's happening with the warlock. You don't know who it is, but they tell you that they'll give you power. And then by 3rd level, well, now you find out who they are. But you have not just gotten a taste of that power. You are a full-blown adventurer that has been reliant on that power to adventure. By the time you would finally figure out who your pact master is, they already would have a lot of control over you, because if they just take all their power away, you no longer have a job. And depending on where you are when you level up, you might level up, like if you guys camped in the middle of a dungeon or something, the middle of the wilderness, and that's where you leveled up, it could be, well, since you didn't realize that your packmaster was Asmodeus, if you don't want this power, that's fine. I'll just take it away. It's a good thing you're not surrounded by wargs and, some displacer beasts, some owlbears. I think I saw a land shark. I can't remember what it's called right now. A Bewlet. There we go. I think I saw some Bewlets around there too. Yeah, gosh. If only you had someone that could give you some power. And I really don't like that connotation being built into Warlocks in general. Because again, was it possible for that to happen? Again, yes. There are a lot of different situations where someone with a lot of power could just find someone that was in a really bad spot and coerce them into signing something that is not in their favor, except for the fact that they get to live if they sign it. So it's not like it was impossible to write that, but the way that the Warlock is written now, it's not that you can create a character like that. You're basically required to create a character like that. It's not possible for a Warlock to fully understand the situation that they're putting themselves in at level 1. It's just not. Because they don't know the identity of the person that they're creating this pact with, it is inherently a bad situation. Like, there really is no other way to put this. It's basically turned all Warlocks into victims. And I'm not a fan of that. I am a victim of abuse. I have personally lived through shit like this. It's not fun. It's not interesting. It didn't make me a better person. It's one of the things that I vehemently despise, is the idea that as a way to try and make abuse victims feel better, it's like, well, diamond is created by intense heat and pressure, so all the horrible things that happened to you, they turned you into a diamond. And the best response I've ever seen to that is, fuck you. My abusers didn't help me. They didn't make me better. I was already a fucking diamond. They just got to learn exactly what it looks like when a diamond shines. We don't need to kind of glorify and romanticize getting out of an abusive relationship, no matter what kind of abusive relationship that is, whether it is romantic, whether it is an abuser victim situation, in a lot of different situations. And we don't need that becoming a core feature of one of the classes in the game. You see, that's my issue with this is, and this is not like a woke thing or just something like that. Like, this is just, again, me as an abuse victim. I am seeing things in the Warlock class that I recognize that I don't want to recognize. And that's really, really nasty. And I don't understand why. Again, and that's my biggest problem with the 2024 revamp, is so many of the problems they fixed, I don't understand why. Were there problems? Yes, the martial caster divide has always been a problem. Weapon mastery was meant to fix that problem. But then you look at most of the weapon mastery effects, and a lot of them are so incredibly limited that you might as well not have them. Like, they brought back the damage type feats from Tasha's Crusher, Slicer, Piercer. And they nerfed them because a lot of the things that those feats do are things that the weapon mastery system already does, And the weapon mastery system, for the most part, will only allow you to use them once per turn. Whereas the old Tasha's versions of these feats allowed you any time you hit someone with bludgeoning damage, this would happen. Or anytime you hit someone with piercing damage, this would happen. So again, I understand them wanting to create more choices and make playing a martial character more dynamic. But every single time they added something to make playing a martial character more dynamic and more interesting, they limited it so much that it barely changed the experience. And so many of these changes, I don't understand why they're there. Because they don't improve the end product. They just add a few more words, and then it's kind of like, here, I'm going to give you this really cool new phone. All right? And this is a smartphone. You can put all these apps and everything on it, but you're only allowed to use it 10 minutes out of every 7 hours. And when you are using it, you actually have to stand up, and the entire 10 minutes you have to recite this mantra that basically is, I understand that I'm using a phone and there are a lot of things on it that can become addictive. I'm not going to become addicted to this phone. And the entire 10 minutes you have to be saying that. As soon as you stop saying that, the phone will stop working. And then when you're not using it, you have to take the phone, you have to put it into a lockbox, and you have to close the lockbox, and it locks with a combination lock. And the combination for that lock changes every 5 minutes. And the only way to figure out what that combination is to find a computer, go to a website, and on this website there will be an equation. Or actually a collection of equations that have 3 different variables, x, y, and z. And when you figure out those 3 variables, they give you 3 numbers. But in order to figure out which order those numbers are, you actually have to go and watch Sesame Street, specifically the episode of Sesame Street that aired on that day in 1976. And figure out which one of those letters shows up in the dialogue first, second, and third in the episode. So you basically have to just listen to what everyone says, and as soon as you hear an X, a Y, or a Z, you go, okay, and that will tell you which order they go in. The phone is next to useless at that point. And that's kind of what I'm getting from all this stuff. Again, I haven't made it through everything. And again, there are some cool things. The new Rogue sneak attack change that I can never remember what it's called. Cunning Strike, I think is what it's called. The new Rogue Cunning Strike system. That's really cool. And I think it makes playing a Rogue really, really interesting and fun. The kind of minor changes that they made to the Monk, I think are good. A lot of the abilities take less focus points. I think it's stupid that they got rid of key and call it focus now, but sure, go ahead, whatever. If you don't like the word key, that's fine. But the Monk isn't significantly different than it was before. And they massively nerfed Stunning Strike, which really didn't need a nerf. As much as a lot of really bad DMs claim that it was super overpowered, it wasn't. I use it in the D&D Adventures League from level 5 up to level 17, and I was never considered the broken character. Ever. So, yeah. Like I said, the more I look into the Warlock, and the more I think about the very, very tiny, tiny bit of lore that's built into it, the less I like the new version of the Warlock. Everything about the Warlock now seems predatory. It seems abusive. And again, the Warlock was always meant to be kind of the wrong choice. The right people making the wrong choice. If you wanted to play a good Warlock, most of the time it was you made a bad choice and now you're learning how to kind of deal with it. So the Warlock was never meant to be a quote-unquote good character. They were meant to be a compelling character. And now they've decided that compelling characters are victims, which I'm not okay with. So, interested to hear what you guys think. If anyone here has actually read through the PHB, specifically the new PHB, specifically the Warlock chapter, and maybe I'm reading into something that's not there because, again, I am an abuse survivor. Multiple types of abuse. I have PTSD. I have both traditional PTSD and complex PTSD. So everything I see is going to be seen through that lens. So if you guys think that I'm reading into something that's not there, let me know in the comments down below. If you guys agree with me that this new version of the Warlock is creepy as fuck, let me know as well. Yeah, the more I get into this, the more I think 3.5 was a revitalization of D&D. Like D&D 3rd edition was not doing super well. It was far too complicated. There were far too many issues in playing it. It took way too long to run. It took way too long to build a character. And it was way too easy to build a bad character. 3.5 created enough changes that it didn't make it any less complex, but it got rid of a few of the rough edges enough to where, and people have been playing it long enough that they now understood the system. And it was a revitalization of 3rd edition. It got more popular after that. The Essentials line for 4th edition was the beginning of the end. And I really think the 2024 revamp of D&D is the beginning of the end of 5th edition. The more I look into this, the less I see here that seems like a positive move for the game. And this is not me saying, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. It's the choices that they made were deliberate, and they had a very specific focus in doing this, and I think they made the wrong choices. They wanted to make D&D even easier for people to get into, and they wanted a little less kind of ambiguity in a lot of the classes so that you would know exactly what it was when you chose this class over this class. And it's taking away a lot of what made 5th edition so special. And I really think in the next few years, support for 5.5 is going to drop drastically unless there's some major changes that happen. But the player's handbook in and of itself is just not great. Like I said, still planning on doing a full in-depth review of the player's handbook. It's just taking me a long time to get through the player's handbook, so we'll see. Anyway, it's going to be all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.